A Hat in Time, the 3D platformer where you collect floating hourglasses as an adorable agent of chaos. Similar to the 3D Mario games, A Hat in Time has a wide variety of colorful levels filled with gems for us to collect. But what if those gems were obstacles? How many pawns does it take to beat A Hat in Time? Let's find out. But before we begin, be sure to subscribe since more challenge runs are on the way. And if you like things that are cute and challenging, wishlist my video game Heartwell on Steam and try out the free demo on the Steam page linked in the description. It's an adorable Souls-like action RPG that I hope to release in the years ahead. Now let's get back to our regularly scheduled chaos. The rules for this challenge run are simple. Beat the game while collecting as few pawns as possible. But what is a pawn, and what counts as collecting them? While A Hat in Time has several items that are called pawns, only the green gems will count as pawns for this challenge run, since they are the only collectibles that increment the pause menu pawn counter. Thus, we are free to collect hearts, crowns, and whatever those things are, since they don't increment the pawn counter. Speaking of counting, we will use this table to keep track of the unavoidable pawns that we collect, since I don't feel like throwing Hat Kid off a cliff every time I accidentally collect a pawn to reset the pause menu counter. Examples of unavoidable pawns include pawns that must be collected on the path to reach a timepiece or time rift, pawns that are used to buy anything useful from the shop, and using pawns to unlock levels. Finally, we cannot use any mods that would give us any gameplay advantage, but we can use cosmetic mods and mods that make the game more difficult. We can also use pawns to buy cosmetic items from the shop, because what's the point of doing a challenge run if we can't look fabulous while doing it? With all that being said, let's discuss how many pawns it takes to beat every level. Welcome to Mafia Town is easy to complete Ponless because there is plenty of space to maneuver throughout the level. The same cannot be said of Barrel Battle, which restricts our movement during the boss battle. While the circular arena does not start with pawns, every Mafia goon drops pawns when they are defeated. To avoid getting trapped by these pawns, I use the Brewing Hat's ranged attack to damage the Mafia goons and try to defeat them in the same area. I also avoided defeating any Mafia goons near this spot so that I could complete the second phase of the boss battle while doing absolutely nothing. By cheesing the second phase and carefully defeating the last Mafia goon, I sent Team Mafia blasting off again and won the barrel battle without collecting pawns. It costs 5 pawns to unlock She Came From Outer Space, but what about the level itself? To reach the Mafia goon without collecting pawns, I platformed on a stack of boxes before jumping and wall running up to the balcony. Then, I carefully fell into the edge of a mud puddle to avoid a pawn in the center. By jumping around the pawns during the chase sequence and avoiding the pawns dropped by the Mafia goon after Hat Kid's jump scares, I completed this level for the low price of 5 pawns plus shipping and handling. Although we can start down with the Mafia for free, there's a pawn blocking the cannon that we need to use to reach the Mafia base. Since my only options were to collect a pawn or defy the laws of physics, I did what anyone in my position would do. Sorcery! By stacking 2 buckets on top of each other and pushing the top bucket below the bottom bucket, we can use a glitch to fly to the island and prove that the laws of physics are merely suggestions. But not even sorcery can save us from the horrors inside the Mafia base: doors. The door frame that leads to the key is too low to jump through without collecting the pawns beneath it, so the best we can do is collect 1 pawn by walking through the door frame diagonally. But even after collecting the key, we have to enter 2 more doors that each force us to collect a pawn, and crawl through an air vent that forces us to collect 2 pawns. So despite our best efforts, we can't complete Down with the Mafia without collecting 5 pawns. If you felt cheated by the 5 pawns that we were forced to collect in the last level, cheating the race forces us to pay 50 pawns before we can even start the level. There's even a pawn on top of the cannon that speedrunners use to beat this level! Thankfully, we can crawl under this pawn and use the time stop hat to just barely reach the timepiece without collecting any additional pawns. Unfortunately, heating up Mafia Town turns up the heat by making us pay 100 pawns to play the level, and there's another pawn on top of the cannon that we need to use to beat the level. Why not just use sorcery like last time? Because the Mafia threw our buckets into the lava! That means that heating up Mafia Town takes 101 pawns to complete! You would think that a level called the Golden Vault would force us to collect a lot of pawns, and you'd be right, if we didn't stand on top of the vault to open it. By opening the vaults from above, we can easily complete this level without collecting any pawns. And lucky for us, the sewers and bazaar time rifts can be reached and completed without collecting any pawns. Unfortunately, the Mafia of Cook's time rift costs 50 pawns to unlock, but we can complete the level without collecting any pawns. Deadbird Studio is complicated. We can avoid the pawns in the lobby with careful double jumps, and skip the pawns in the schoolhouse by jumping onto a wooden tent to reach the roof. Once we reach this area, I double jumped and dived towards the second sandbag from an outside angle to avoid the floating pawn. I also climbed a light post to jump over this gap and skip the pawn in front of the falling tent cutout. For the section with the narrow chain-linked fence, we normally need to jump into this pawn-filled corner to avoid getting spotted by the security owl. However, we can sneak past this owl by diving over them at the start of their path. And once we were at the final sandbags, I double jumped and dived at an angle to barely reach the last sandbag and avoid collecting any pawns. While Deadbird Studio was complicated, Murder on the Owl Express has doors. The door that leads to the first key requires us to collect a pawn, but after that, we can jump on this bookshelf and wall run to the platform above to skip multiple doors with pawns. We have to collect another pawn to enter the security room, but the boiler room key can be reached quite easily. After returning to the security room, we can double jump and dive from the top of this machine and perform a precise wall running jump to reach the button above. This lets us skip another room and finish Murder on the Owl Express with only 2 pawns collected. Picture Perfect was supposed to be easy, but everything changed when the paparazzi attacked. The camera penguins give us pawns every time they take a picture of us, so we'll have to avoid them while still reaching Matt's Diva status. Thankfully, there's just enough DJ Drew's endorsements and penguins with question marks to grow our YouTube channel and finish the level without collecting any pawns. It costs 30 pawns to unlock Train Rush, but there's only 1 pawn in this entire chaotic level that is unavoidable. Can you guess which one? If you answer door number 2, you're correct, because nothing is more dangerous on an exploding train than the doors we met along the way. The big parade was so easy that I collected 0 pawns on my first attempt without taking damage. That isn't saying much though, considering DJ Drew's charged us 150 pawns for a ticket to a show that we performed in! At least he didn't charge us any pawns for the award ceremony, and we were able to reach the timepiece before the conductor could throw any doors at us. Unfortunately, there are doors in the Battle of the Birds, and these doors make us work for it. To even collect the pawn in front of this door, we have to use a grappling hook to cross this massive chasm with multiple pawns beneath each hook point. We can jump and dive past the first hook point to grapple the second hook point, but have to collect 3 pawns in the process. With the momentum of the second hook point, however, we can jump and dive past the third hook point to grapple the fourth hook point from the side. If we jump immediately after grappling the fourth hook point and dive forward, we can barely reach the ledge and avoid collecting the pawns beneath the fourth hook point. After collecting the door's unavoidable pawn, we can bypass the pawns in the warehouse by wall running and jumping on various props, but the back rooms are a bit more involved. We can get past the pawn in this doorway by climbing the clothing rack and doing a precise double hop and dive. Once we have the key, we double jump and dive at just the right height to get through another doorway, narrowly avoiding a row of pawns. To reach the upper floor, we first climb on a traffic cone, then double jump and wall run to stand on a thin door frame. This gives us enough height to double jump to the upper floor free of contamination. Unfortunately, the narrow air vents are completely contaminated, forcing us to collect 5 pawns to reach the conductor. Thankfully, there aren't any pawns in the boss battle, so we can finish this filthy level after collecting 9 contaminated pawns. The time rifts are much nicer than the movie studio that's exploiting us, because both the Owl Express and Moon time rifts can be reached and completed without collecting pawns. Unfortunately, that same movie studio charged us 100 pawns to play the Deadbird Studio time rifts, making this the second time this chapter that we were cheated out of a pawnless level. Thankfully, that's the last level of Chapter 2, and compared to Deadbird Studio, Subcon Forest is a breath of fresh air. Contractual obligations is easy, the mail delivery service is trivial, and the Toilet of Doom is disgusting, but at least it didn't make us clean up any pawns. On the other hand, the Subcon well is flooded with pawns, so we'll need to tread carefully to avoid them. The green platforms outside Subcon well have a lot of pawns, but we can evade them by jumping on the edges of each platform. Once inside the room with the hookshot badge, use the force to pick up the apple from a distance and avoid the pawns surrounding it. After setting an ice wall to the Shadow Realm and collecting the hookshot badge, run up the side of this curved surface to gain enough height to reach a grapple point that doesn't have a pawn beneath it. Next, use momentum and a double jump to get on the platform above, then double jump and dive to hit the button. This lets us escape the hookshot run without collecting any pawns, but we still have to escape Subcon well itself. At the first grapple point, jump on a torch and turn around to platform into a pipe, then double jump to reach the higher platform. This causes the water level to rise, allowing us to swim across to the button that lowers the ladder. After climbing the ladder, double jump and dive to the 2 pipes in the center, then wall run and stand on top of them. Next, wall run on top of the upward curved pipe and platform onto the downward curved pipe to avoid the pawns near a grapple point. Finally, use this grapple point to swing and dive to the last ladder to escape the well. By following these steps and double jumping to avoid the pawn below the timepiece, we completed Subcon well without collecting a single pawn. While Queen Vanessa's Manor might seem like a horror level at first, it's actually more like a Super Mario Maker level, because it has a dev exit. By crawling through the hidden air vents between the final 2 barrels in the basement, we can skip the manor without collecting any pawns, and give Gears for Breakfast a heart for good measure. Speaking of hearts, Snatcher became our best friend when he didn't force us to collect any pawns in Your Contract Has Expired. He may have stolen our soul and used us for manual labor, but that's a small price to pay compared to the 150 pawns we spent to enter the big parade. Surely the Snatcher would never make us pay such a ridiculous price. Oh come on, Snatcher, I thought we were friends! Despite the high price tag to enter the sleepy Subcon Time Rift, there aren't any mandatory pawns in the Time Rift itself. Additionally, the Village and Pipe Time Rifts can be reached and completed without collecting pawns, giving Subcon Force the highest number of pawnless levels out of any chapter so far. Does this mean that Chapter 4 will be even better? After all, Alpine Skyline is a free roam chapter, and open world games are known for being notoriously empty. Sadly, Alpine Skyline missed the memo and starts us on a mountain filled with pawns. While we can carefully platform to the summit without collecting pawns, there are 3 rotating switches surrounded by pawns that we need to activate to spawn a zipline to the village. There's no way to activate the switches without using our umbrella, and since the umbrella tax collects pawns, the best we can do is position ourselves to only collect 9 pawns instead of 12. This effectively means that it costs 9 pawns to access Alpine Skyline, and we haven't even started any levels! We can reach the birdhouse without collecting any pawns, and the level itself is straightforward until the very end. There's a pawn on a small platform that we're intended to use to reach the timepiece, but we're able to skip it by wall running and wall jumping between the tree and the rock pillar. This lets us complete the birdhouse pawnless, but what about the lava cage? While the level can be completed pawnless, we're expected to use this cannon with a pawn above it to reach the lava cage. Since there's no sorcery or shenanigans that we can do to skip this, it takes 1 pawn to complete the lava cage. The Windmill is an amazing level, and an absolute gauntlet for this challenge run. The ziplines leading to the Windmill force us to collect 1 pawn, and after we reach the Windmill, we're met with pawns around every corner. Since there are so many pawns in precarious places, our best option is to skip as much of the level as possible. The first skip occurs at the entrance, where I climb the giant jars outside, then double jump and wall run to the far left corner. This lets us barely grapple the bell and open the outside gate to skip the first indoor section. After entering the second floor, I jump onto the edge of the first circular window, then wall run up the spinning box to skip another indoor section. Once we reach the level's midpoint, I jump on these jars to reach another circular windowsill. From there, I double jump and dive towards the right wall before wall jumping to reach a higher platform, skipping another indoor section. Next, I platform backwards through the moving carts and jump on top of a metal pole to gain enough heights to reach the rotating platforms, skipping a big outdoor section. After climbing further in the windmill, I jump onto the tiny lamp platform to reach a small rotating gear in the center of the room, then jump for a rotating platform to reach the hanging sandbags safely. This lets us reach the timepiece without collecting any more pawns. Unfortunately, the ziplines before the Twilight Bell force us to collect 5 pawns, and once we enter the level, it looks like we have to collect more pawns under the grapple points over this bottomless pit. However, this pillar has a checkpoint zone, an invisible space that forces us to respawn on the pillar if we enter it before falling out of bounds. By double jumping and diving towards the pillar, we can enter the checkpoint zone before falling into the bottomless pit, causing us to respawn on the pillar and avoid these pawns. After entering the last locked door, there are more pawns beneath the grapple points we are expected to use to reach the upper platforms. Thankfully, jumping on this door gives us enough height to reach the upper platforms, allowing us to get to the timepiece without collecting any additional pawns. In The Illness Has Spread, the real plague isn't the poisonous plants, it's the ziplines. Most ziplines have pawns strewn all along them, and it can be tricky to tell which way to lean on the zipline to avoid them. Even worse, the first blue zipline has a diagonal string of pawns, making it impossible to proceed without collecting at least 1 pawn. Fortunately, the rest of the level is straightforward, allowing us to finish the level without collecting any additional pawns. Similarly, the Curly Tail Trail and Twilight Bell time rifts can be reached and completed without collecting pawns, but the Alpine Skyline time rift is a different story. In addition to costing 200 pawns to unlock, the time rift orb at the end of the level is a big hurdle. Some time rifts have orbs that must must be hit multiple times with a melee attack to unlock the timepiece. The orb drops pawns after every hit, and the final hit causes a massive explosion of pawns to emanate from the orb. I was able to avoid collecting pawns in other time rifts by hitting the orb at an angle and making use of the wide space to avoid the pawns. However, this time rift has a much smaller space to work with, and the angled platforms make it much more likely that pawns congregate around the orb. The best I could do was use the homing attack to keep the orb in the center, but even then, I still had to collect 4 pawns to reach the timepiece. Given how tricky Alpine Skyline was, will the Arctic cruise fare any better? Bon Voyage had a promising start, until I remembered that this cruise has doors. This door leading to the atrium forces us to collect 1 pawn in order to reach a timepiece fragment, since the only alternate path requires using a grapple point with multiple pawns beneath it. Thankfully, the rest of the level can be finished without collecting pawns. Unlike the calm pace of the previous level, Ship Shape is a frantic fetch quest with an unforgiving time limit. Failure to complete 18 tasks before the captain throws a temper tantrum will force us to start from the beginning of the level, and any tasks we fail to complete will reduce our timer. Add on the fact that we can't complete any tasks in the upper atrium due to unavoidable pawns, and you have the perfect storm to make the most frustrating level in the game downright infuriating. I spent over an hour trying and failing to complete this level Ponless, all while listening to this game's version of the Spider-Man 2 pizza delivery theme. But eventually, I became one with the pizza and delivered enough tasks to convince Captain Walrusface to give us the timepiece without collecting any pawns. Rock the Boat is normally an easier level than Ship Shape, but the frigid water, angled platforms, and narrow corridors make avoiding pawns disastrously difficult. For example, we need to rescue the baby conductor on this small box to progress the level, but it's difficult to land on the box without collecting the pawn in the center. I found that swimming in the frigid water and climbing the box was the most consistent way to avoid this pawn. When we have to rescue the captain within a time limit, however, the difficulty spike is enormous. The path into the kitchen becomes blocked with pawns, requiring us to perform a precise double jump, dive, and dive cancel from the chandelier to get past them. And once we find the captain, we have to do another mid-air jump and dive to exit the kitchen, as well as precise platforming on the tilted chandeliers to escape the dining room without collecting pawns. Unfortunately, once we re-entered the casino, I learned that a mischievous seal placed pawns all over the main platform leading to the exit. Thankfully, the seal forgot to place pawns on the ceiling, so I used these slot machines to reach the lights above, escape the casino, and foil the seal's sneaky schemes. From there, I frantically platformed through Antarctica to save the captain and finish the level without collecting any pawns. The balcony time rift requires 1 pawn to reach since there are only 2 ways to reach it, and this door requires fewer pawns than the grapple point at the ground floor. Fortunately, the level can be finished without collecting any additional pawns, much like the deep sea time rift after we enter it. Unfortunately, the deep sea time rift requires 265 pawns to unlock, so Hat Kid's free scuba diving lesson ends up costing us a fortune. It really makes me wonder why Hat Kid didn't take a staycation instead, especially when the spaceship has 2 time rifts that can be reached and completed without collecting pawns. Maybe Hat Kid just likes to travel, and what better place to travel to than the second DLC, Nyakuza Metro. We can easily reach the main station timepiece without collecting pawns, but they aren't the only barriers in Nyakuza Metro. Throughout the Metro are force fields that require us to have specific Metro passes in order to walk through them. Because Metro passes cost 10 pawns each, we need to try our best to avoid them. The yellow force field is our first obstacle since it blocks the intended path to reach the yellow overpass station timepiece. Rather than buy the Metro pass, I climbed this archway in the center of the Metro, then wall runned towards this billboard to reach the upper levels. This let me bypass the yellow force field and reach the yellow overpass station timepiece without collecting pawns. It also lets us reach the yellow overpass manhole without buying a Metro pass. However, the intended route to reach the timepiece involves wall jumping in this narrow section filled with pawns. I tried reaching the timepiece by double jumping on the train and wall running towards the balcony, but the balcony's railing was just out of reach. After running out of ideas involving trains pulled by giant cats, I noticed 2 steel beams that were close enough to wall jump between. By wall jumping between these steel beams, I gained enough height to jump and dive to the balcony and avoid every pawn in the yellow overpass manhole. The main path to the Green Queen station is blocked by another force field, so we'll need to get creative to get past it. After using the billboard again to reach the upper floors, I jumped on top of a train and wall runs to reach the green balcony railing. By walking along this railing, I gained access to the upper metro and skipped the green force field. From there, I performed my best Spider-Man impression to scale a skyscraper and rescue the timepiece from those sinister pawns. If saving the Green Queen station timepiece took heroic acts, just how difficult will it be to save the Green Queen manhole timepiece from all those despicable pawns? It's easy. Next! Bluefin Tunnel. the relaxing, underground section with exactly one entrance. And it's blocked by a force field! We need to buy a Metro Pass if we want to go down the Bluefin tunnel the intended way, but what if we went up instead? The yellow overpass has a floorless section that runs directly over Bluefin tunnel, but an invisible barrier prevents us from dropping down there normally. However, by performing a perfect dive roll off this ledge, we can fall far enough below the barrier to activate a checkpoint in Bluefin tunnel. This lets us skip the blue force field and complete the rest of the tunnel without collecting pawns. For Pinkpaw Station, the ceiling is our friend. We can access the chandelier at the top of the metro by using the secret manhole on the roof of the building we scaled for the Green Queen Station timepiece. From there, we can reach the Pinkpaw Station balcony by timing our jumps and dives to avoid fall damage, allowing us to get the timepiece without collecting pawns. While reaching the top of Pinkpaw Station was easy, getting to the manhole at the bottom of the station is a different story. Pink force fields block the ground floor entrances, so I decided to try descending through Pinkpaw Station from the top floor, only to be stopped by good game design. Throughout Pinkpaw Station are invisible fall barriers that force the player back up to a previous checkpoint. Normally, these fall barriers prevent the player from falling too far as they climb Pinkpaw Station the right way. Since we're going the wrong way, however, the fall barriers prevent us from making progress. I tried dropping down in different areas for over 35 minutes to see if there were any gaps in the fall barrier, but nothing seemed to work. Just when I was about to give up, I discovered standing at the edge of a platform with a steep slope will cause Hat Kid to slowly descend in a grounded state. Why does this matter? Because fall barriers only detect us when Hat Kid is in a falling state, not when we're in a grounded state such as walking or standing. As far as the game is concerned, Hat Kid is standing even though she's slowly descending down a 4-story building. By using this glitch to slowly descend for 5 minutes, I successfully smug danced past every fall barrier and entered the Pinkpaw manhole. Once I learned that the electrical charges don't increment the pawn counter, I easily completed the Pinkpaw manhole timepiece without collecting any pawns. With the Pink Nightmare behind us, only one level remained in Nyakuza Metro, Rush Hour. Rush Hour is a long level that requires us to go through most of Nyakuza Metro while outrunning a mob of angry cats. I was worried that we would need to buy Metro Passes to unlock the force fields throughout the level, but it turns out that the Metro Passes were a scam. The Empress, in her infinite wisdom, unlocked all the force fields in a level where she's trying to stop us from escaping. Because the Queen of Cats was too distracted by the laser walls, we could play through the level normally while focusing on avoiding pawns. At the end of the Pink Train Tunnel, I carefully jumped to avoid pawns near the air vent. After reaching Greenpaw Station, I wall run to the top of the green sign to avoid using 2 cat vacuums that have pawns near them. From there, I walked on the green balcony railing to avoid the mob of cats, then jumped on a train to reach the yellow overpass section early. After that, Bluefin Tunnel is our next roadblock since we need to jump down an air vent filled with pawns. The air vent is too narrow to avoid the pawns normally. However, we can despawn the pawns in the air vents by getting run over by a train and respawning at a checkpoint. From there, we can finish our daily commute without collecting pawns. Unfortunately, we need to pay a total of 300 pawns to enter the Rumpy Factory time rift and finish Chapter 7. With the DLC behind us, there's only one level left to cover, Time's End. Time's End is a grueling gauntlet filled with fiery lava and evil gemstones. Of all the traps in this level, these were the trickiest obstacles involving pawns, and each required a different strategy. For springs, I jumped on the corners to get launched upward while avoiding pawns. For breakable boxes, I jumped backwards after throwing a potion to evade the pawns released from the box. For the narrow beam with a cannon, I carefully jumped between the pawns at the middle of the beam while using the time stop hat to make the projectiles easier to avoid. For these grapple points, I held left after attaching to the first grapple point to swing away from a pawn, then used momentum and a double jump dive to barely reach the lava faucet. From there, I leisurely skipped across lava faucets to avoid the pawns in this section. Finally, for these narrow pillars, I used the time stop hat to slow down the hammer traps while jumping on each pillar's corners to avoid the pawns in the center. By surviving this gauntlet and defeating Mustache Girl with the power of friendship, I completed Time's End without collecting any pawns. Now that we've reviewed the levels, just how many pawns does it take to beat a hat in time? We need 25 timepieces to unlock the finale, and while there are more than 25 levels that can be completed pawnless, we don't have access to every level from the start. This timeline shows the timepiece requirements for unlocking specific chapters before the finale, and I'll review specific level requirements as needed. Chapter 2 requires 4 timepieces to unlock, and while Welcome to Mafia Town and Barrel Battle are freebies, the only remaining level at this point in the game requires pawns to unlock, and even even if we did complete this level, we'd have to complete Down with the Mafia to unlock other levels to play in Chapter 1. But with the help of speedrunning glitches, we can clip through walls in the spaceship to reach the lab and gallery time rifts early, allowing us to unlock Chapter 2 without collecting pawns. The next important milestone is 7 timepieces, since that would provide access to a lot of pawnless levels in Chapter 3. Unfortunately, only Deadbird Studio and Picture Perfect can be completed pawnless, leaving us 1 level short of unlocking Subcon Forest. To get our 7th timepiece, we'll complete Murder on the Owl Express, since it requires the fewest pawns out of the remaining levels available at this point in the game. We'll also complete the Owl Express time rift, since that's a pawnless level that unlocks after completing Murder on the Owl Express. With Chapter 3 unlocked, we can easily complete 8 timepieces in Subcon Forest without collecting any pawns, giving us more than enough timepieces to unlock Chapter 4. This means that we're only 4 timepieces away from unlocking Chapter 7, where there are enough pawnless timepieces to easily reach the finale. Unfortunately, we cannot unlock any more pawnless levels at this point in the game without completing levels with unavoidable pawns. Because our train and concert tickets are still ridiculously overpriced, our best options are to unlock more levels in either Mafia Town or Alpine Skyline. But which option will give us the fewest pawns? Is it this path in Mafia Town, where we complete She Came From Outer Space and Down with the Mafia to unlock the Sewers Time Rift and Golden Vault? Or is it this path in Alpine Skyline, where we complete the opening puzzle to unlock the Birdhouse, Lavacate, Windmill, and Curlytail Trail Time Rift? The answer is Mafia Town. While She Came From Outer Space and Down with the Mafia costs 10 pawns to complete, that's still 1 less pawn than it takes to complete the Alpine Skyline levels, due to the 9 unavoidable pawns in the start of Chapter 4. By finishing these Mafia Town levels and pretending that Alpine Skyline doesn't exist, we gained enough timepieces to unlock Chapter 7. And after escaping a train station, melting a castle, and sending Hat Kid back to Space Elementary School, we proved that you can complete a hat in time while only collecting 12 pawns. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Check out the links to Heartwell, Discord, and Twitch in the description. And remember, persistence pays off, both in games and in life. Thanks for watching.